This is Cotswold District Council Live. Good afternoon, Happy New Year, and welcome to another edition of Cotswold District Council Live. Today it's a Q&A special, and I'm thrilled to say that I'm joined by an esteemed panel of my colleagues, my councillor colleagues, who are going to be answering your questions directly. Thank you to everybody that submitted one in advance, and we'll get to those in a minute. But I'm thrilled to say I'm joined by Councillor Jenny Ford, Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing, Councillor Tony Dale, our Cabinet Member for Economy and Skills, Andrew Doherty, who is in charge of the bins, waste and recycling, Mike Evermy, he's a Deputy Leader of the Council and he is in charge of finance and car parking, and I'm joined by Rob Weaver, who is our recently appointed Chief Executive. So yeah, this is really your opportunity to learn all about what your local council is up to and put questions to us directly. Now this month it's a bit different, clearly we're back in lockdown restrictions and I'm here in an empty studio on my own. I am however joined by my colleagues via the wonders of technology. Thank goodness for that. So with that in mind, please bear in mind that there might be a few technical difficulties and be patient while we work those through. But we're not expecting any, so we should be good to go. We're going to start now with a COVID-19 update, and we've got a video to start with.
Hi, I'm Jenny Ford and I'm the Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing on Cotswold District Council. I'm recording you this message from my home. The current pandemic is serious. It's really serious. And we all, where we can, need to stay at home to protect the NHS, especially now more than ever as our NHS are delivering the vaccinations across the Cotswolds. All the things we do on their own aren't perfect. Washing hands, wearing masks, social distancing, staying at home, getting vaccinated, but doing all of them together does work. I know it feels relentless at the moment and everyone has a story to tell. There is no hierarchy of who's struggling most. We're definitely in the middle of the night of this pandemic and it can feel overwhelming and we can often feel out of control. The morning seems a long way off, but you are not alone. Talk to someone you trust, or speak to us, your local councillors. We may be politicians, but we're good people and we're here for you. So give us, your council, a call on 01285 62 3000 or go on our website at cotswold.gov.uk and we'll do our best to help or guide you in the right direction. Until the morning comes, and we have to believe it will, please, where possible, keep looking out for one another. It's what we do best in the Cotswolds. Stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. Thank you.
Important message there. I'm thrilled to say we are joined by Jenny Ford now. Jenny, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Joe.
Good. Well, glad to have you. So, Jenny, clearly we find ourselves in lockdown again. What are the key messages you want to get across to local residents?
Okay, the key messages I want to get across are, at this moment, every 30 seconds, the NHS is admitting someone in England to a hospital with COVID-19. And a quarter of those in hospital are under 55 years old. And if it doesn't kill them, it's leaving them with a lifelong illness. And this is why we need a vaccination programme. We're currently vaccinating 140 people every minute, and 1 out of every 140 people would currently die. So we're saving one life for every one of those 140. However, and it's a really, really big fat one, there is no data yet on the vaccine stopping transmission. So until a significant percentage of the population are vaccinated, we have to continue to do all those other things that I talked about in that video just there. I watched a programme last night about how the virus spread. It's only been a year, and look at what the virus has done in only 1 year. Look at what it's done in 1 year. So if we don't get the cases down, then there's a danger it could mutate or change in behaviour again. So it's what I was saying before. We have to make sure that we continue to do all of those things that we've done so we can get the cases down and we can get those vaccinations rolled out.
Thanks, Jenny. So we've got some questions coming in, and we've got quite a few actually on COVID-19. Going to start with Donna, who's just posted on Facebook, saying 99.7% of people survive. Stop scaring people. What's your message to Donna?
Okay, this isn't just about the deaths, as I've just said. This is about every 30 seconds the NHS is admitting someone into hospital. And when those hospitals get full, it means they can't do the other things that they are normally wanting to do. So I know some people who work in our nearest hospitals in Swindon. I know people who are surgeons for all sorts of other things, and they have had to cancel and put off and defer all of their operations for all of those other issues. So, operations for hip transplants or knee work or cancer or any of those sorts of things. And so, yeah, it's good that people are scared. They should be, because if it gets overwhelmed in the NHS, then the knock-on implications for all the other things that people need help with and need our NHS for, and we need the NHS to roll out the vaccination, will be impacted. So I don't think that we're being hysterical.
OK, we've got a question here from David in the North Cotswolds. Is the District Council working with the NHS and partners in the vaccine rollout across the county? And can you give us any insight into how the vaccine programme is going here in the Cotswolds?
Yeah, sure, I can. Actually, I just received some information this afternoon that we are ranked first nationally for the proportion of over 80s that have been vaccinated. It's actually going very, very well in Gloucestershire. Indeed, and the rollout is going extremely well. I also found out recently that to date, not one person has refused to have a vaccination or is not shown up. So at the moment, it's going very successfully. The NHS are doing a fantastic job. It's very, very smooth. We've got more than enough volunteers and people coming forward to help with it. So it's looking very good. The only thing we need to rely on now is the vaccine supply.
OK, thanks, Jenny. Let's mix it up a bit. Let's Rob. This is your first CDC Live in your position as Chief Executive, so welcome. Great to have you on board. I'm going to put a question straight to you, if you don't mind, Rob. This is from an anonymous resident in Cirencester. I've witnessed a lot of people in the streets of Cirencester town throughout the lockdown. Considering the national stay-at-home directive from government, what would the council like to say to those breaching COVID regulations?
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and thanks very much. And it's great to be part of CDC Live, my first session of the new year. So welcome, everybody. I think, as Councillor Jenny Ford has said, we really all need to be playing our part here. And I was watching BBC Breakfast News this morning, and they were talking to people who have lost loved ones. And it was incredibly moving for me to watch those news clips this morning. And every single one of us has got an absolute responsibility to make sure that we are trying to mitigate, as far as we possibly can, the spread of COVID-19. So my message would be very clearly on behalf of the council, look, we've all got to play our part. People might think it's not going to make a huge difference if I'm the one who pops out for a loaf of bread or a pint of milk. I'll wear my mask and it'll be okay. But the transmission rates are so incredibly high, and the potential for spreading it to somebody who could be far more vulnerable than you is so incredibly high that we must all be playing our part. So my message would really be, look, stay at home, protect lives, save the NHS. Don't be going out unless you necessarily need to. There's a whole range of different ways of being able to shop online and use neighbours, voluntary and community groups. Again, as an authority, we're really well set up to connect people to the help that they need. So please, do this for other people, and let's make sure that we're not breaching those rules, and let's make sure we're trying to curb the virus. We've got the highest death rate now per head of population in the world, and that's not a badge of honour. That's an incredibly dangerous and damaging place to be in, so we've all got to be doing our bit.
Great, thank you. Got some comments trickling in. Kay Ransom. Hello, gang. Nice to see you. Kay, it's always lovely to see you too. Keep up the good work. I know it's very difficult at the minute for you and your business. Cyrus Potter. Can you do a backflip? Maybe later, Cyrus. Maybe. I'll have a think about that. Right. Next up, we have got. Let's mix it up. Shall we move? Let's take one that's not about COVID. Let's have a brief break on COVID. Well, I'll tell you what, now's probably an opportunity. We've got a couple of questions about flooding, and I know we've got a video about flooding. So let's go to that video, and then we'll take some questions on flooding after that. So if my team here could roll the VT. So it's been a really, really difficult 24 hours or 48 hours for a lot of residents here in the Cotswolds. Got really bad instances of sewage flooding here in Cirencester. Down in Siddington, the river sort of burst its banks, running water through the village, and we know there are some issues in other places such as South Cerney. Andy, you've been sort of leading a bit of a charge today, our Cabinet Member for the Environment. Do you want to just sort of summarise what's happening, and B, what residents can do?
Okay, so main concern is there's a lot of flooding happening in areas where we haven't seen much flooding before, and a lot of it is water coming up from below, and that's really hard to do anything with. If you've got concerns, do some basic prep yourself. If you're worried about water close to the property, try and raise things off the ground, bring up your mats, lift anything valuable off the ground. Do all those kinds of things that you can do yourself. We're working as much as we can with towns and parish councils to get sandbags into places that need them, where they'll make a difference and where they're useful. But that literally is now at the point of, if it's lapping at the back door, then we can get bags out, and that's the kind of place that will do something useful. So the key thing at the minute is tonight we've got another storm coming in. We're expecting a lot of rain overnight. Tomorrow and early morning, that means the rivers will rise again, the groundwater will rise again. So if you're concerned, take some preventative measures yourself, do it early and do it soon while you've got light to work in.
Thanks. Really difficult time. We're aware of instances all over the place, reported via our emergency number, which is in the post above, and we'll try our best to get to you. But everybody's very stretched, a difficult time of year, obviously, but we are doing our very best to try and tackle these instances, trying to roll all the agencies together, get them talking to each other, and we will continue to do that. So thank you to everybody that's volunteered or helped, and difficult times. I'm thrilled to say we're joined by Councillor Andrew Doherty via Zoom. Andy, I feel like I saw too much of you over the Christmas period than is healthy owing to the floods. As nice as it was to spend it with you, it's in particularly horrible circumstances. So yeah, Andy, give us a bit of an update on flooding generally. And yeah, we've got a question from Roger in Cirencester. What has been done since the incidents?
Okay, so in terms of generally, obviously the big event we had was Storm Bella coming in, and then we had Storm Christoph. Fortunately, in our area, we had a gap of some relatively dry weather between the two, which let the river levels drop again a bit, let the groundwater drop again a bit. We're not out of winter yet. The groundwater levels are still pretty high. They're still a concern. In the last part of last year, we had in some parts of the Cotswolds exceptionally high groundwater levels and river levels. And as soon as that happens, that's when the land is no longer able to respond to the water coming down in the storm, and that's when we start to get the flooding events. So we obviously did a lot of on-the-ground response work as part of that, particularly in the Churn Valley, which is one of the areas most badly affected. We've been doing some follow-up work after that in terms of replenishing sandbag supplies, because we got through about 2,000 sandbags ourselves over that Christmas period, for example. And also getting in an additional pump capability, and then having the teams on standby, and kind of simple things we can do when there are new storms coming in. In terms of other things we've done, one of the big areas is to try and work out what some of the differences were from this flooding to other flooding. Everyone tends to think back to 2007, but 2007 really was quite exceptional in weather terms, in terms of what happened in that period up to July, because it wasn't just July, it was the 2 months before it were incredibly wet, the wettest 3 months ever by historical standards. So everyone thinks of 2007. What we're seeing now is a lot of work's been done since 2007. Some of those problems don't arise anymore, but we're seeing new ones crop in other places. And one of the big areas is to identify whether that's because of problems with maintenance, whether things are starting to fail, or whether we're actually seeing different behaviour in the weather. We've literally had more rainfall in a particular area than has fallen there before. And then we're seeing that coming through in terms of unusually high levels that we're seeing in Cirencester, for example. So a lot of that is about working out what happened so we can press the right people to have the right remedial actions as we go forward.
Okay, Andy, thank you very much for that. Great to see some questions trickling in. Let's take one from Tom in Cirencester. This is one that we received in advance. I'm concerned about my house flooding. What should I do to prevent my flooding in my property? Andy, there are probably many things it can do, but a nice brief answer on that would be appreciated to reassure Tom.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't say questions trickling in for flooding.
Yeah.
So the most important thing, and I think I mentioned it in the windy video there, is preparation. Preparing in advance is the most important thing you can do. The exact specifics of that are going to vary a bit depending on what type of property is most likely for your flooding is most likely for your property. Have a look on the flooding pages on the CDC website. There's a really good link on there to an Environment Agency document on what to do before, after, and during a flood, which is a really good guide to those three things. And one of the things it then links to is a little template you can fill in with all the essentials you need to make a note of about your property and your circumstances and your local area if you get a flooding. The key thing is, if it's dark in the middle of the night and water is suddenly lapping everywhere, you want to have done the thinking about how you're going to respond to that in advance. And if you're in an area where you're more at risk of particularly things like river or surface water flooding, that's important to do in advance. Then you're going to have a much better chance of getting through it with minimum damage if and when flooding actually occurs.
Okay, thanks, Andy. I think that's concise and to the point. So it's a case of we'll do what we can to help and the other agencies, but there is an element of personal responsibility that's required, making sure you're protecting your own property. Callum Jones in Morton says, can you tell us, after an enormous amount of money was put into flooding protection in Morton, how half the town is still under a lot of water during the recent flash floods? Andy, do you just want to comment on that?
I can comment a little bit on that, but the specific schemes there are before my time, and a lot of the flood response work is led by the County Council. What I would say, though, to be fair to the agencies who've done work up until now, is a lot of places where you might have expected to have problems haven't had them recently. So a lot of the flood defences work have done their job. Where we are now is we're either getting different problems cropping up, or we're seeing problems resulting from things like maintenance not taking place, which is a big issue. I think after 2007, there was a lot of effort put in, but over the years, people tend to forget about the things that need to be done to prevent flooding from becoming a problem later. So one of the things we were doing somewhere like Morton, and I know there's some specific property flooding, there was a lot of water in places as opposed to property flooding, but there were some businesses and actual residential properties that were flooded. So those we know about, and again, it's working back to determine why that happened, why the schemes that aren't in there already why they were unable to protect them, and what needs fixing to avoid that happening again in the future.
Great. Okay, thank you, Andy. We might come back to flooding in a second, but I'm conscious we've got Mike and Tony on the line, and they'll want to talk about bits in their area. Got a couple more questions for Jenny. This is from another one from Donna. None of you are talking about the effect on mental health. COVID-19 isn't the only reason why people die. I'll pass it over to Jenny in a second, but I can tell you, Donna, as somebody that suffers with mental health problems myself, I've got an anxiety disorder, trust me, we are more than aware of the impact that this is having on mental health. And I think if you're an avid follower of Cotswold District Council's social media accounts, you saw last week we did a piece around the support available, how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with stress. So we're acutely aware of the impact on people's mental health. Jenny, in 30 seconds, do you just want to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. We are acutely aware of the mental issues, which is why in the last lockdown, we took it upon ourselves as a council. We didn't have to do this, but we individually rang and contacted by telephone over 4,000 of our CEVs, our clinically extremely vulnerable people across the district. And it was very much for that reason. I mean, obviously to ring them to see if they needed any support, but with the majority of them, it was to have a chat and just to check that they were okay, check in on them. And we absolutely know that this lack of social contact and seeing other people is having a long-lasting effect on people's mental health. And we have a real commitment, as you say, Joe, to treating mental and physical health on a par with each other. And I think I said in the last CDC Live that one of the things that I think has been really positive about this pandemic is the legitimacy it's given to people to talk about their mental health with the same credibility as they are about their physical health. So we are very committed to that.
Thanks, Jen. One more for you, Jen. Jenny, I don't think you've answered the question about CDC's involvement with the vaccine rollout. Unless I'm mistaken, CDC has no direct involvement with the vaccine programme, although you seem to want to take credit for its success to date. I didn't read that, but maybe you want to clarify.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, we're not directly involved, no, absolutely. I mean, other than we are helping with the messaging around the vaccinations, we're trying to support, we're in regular meetings, myself, Rob Weaver and other people from the council are in regular meetings about the vaccine rollout, and comms and communications with our residents is a huge part of that. So in that respect, we are very much involved. Because there is concerns that as we go down the cohorts that there will be more vaccine hesitancy, there will be elements of people being concerned about having the vaccine and getting access to it. So we are always involved as the authority that knows our residents the best. We absolutely are involved from that perspective.
Thanks, Jen. Right, I want to talk about, we've got questions here about parking, we've got questions here about business grants and the support available, and about council tax. So I want to bring in my two other colleagues. We've got Mike Evermy and Tony Dale. So Mike, let's come to you first. You've got lots under your wing, haven't you? Parking, you've got finances, and as well as being my deputy, it's a pretty big job you've got there. So let's ask a question. So as a taxi driver, this is from Wendy via Twitter. As a taxi driver, I have not been eligible for the most government grants. When are you going to support me and others like me, Mike?
We've just relaunched last week our business grants scheme, so reopened applications, and we have, within the scope of the additional restrictions grant, included taxi drivers and private hire drivers. It's important to note, though, that if taxi or private hire drivers are receiving support under the self-employment scheme, they can't be eligible for both. But for those that aren't receiving support under that, please do go onto our website, the coronavirus business pages, and put in an application. Great.
And Mike is always up for receiving emails from residents who want to raise stuff directly with him, and he'll chase those up and look into those. So do, via the council's website, find Mike's contact details, and he's absolutely more than willing to take that. Aren't you, Mike?
Yes, thank you, Joe.
He nods approvingly. Excellent. That's good news. Right, okay. I'm going to... another one here from Callum Jones. Can you explain why we have to pay X amount of council tax? Oh, the question suddenly disappeared. Where's it gone? Bear with me, guys. These are the technical difficulties. There we go. Right, can you explain why we have to pay X amount of council tax for work on roads and police, etc., when we really see any police around the police station in Morton in Marsh, and I don't see any improvements to the roads? So, Mike, just want to give us a very, in 30 seconds, a potted history of where council tax goes. That might be easier said than done, though.
Most of the council tax that you pay goes to Gloucestershire County Council, and they are responsible for upkeep of the roads, and also for some key services like looking after vulnerable adults and children. They're obviously balancing their budget, and they'll be making a decision on their council tax for next year imminently, as will ourselves. As district council, we only get 7.5% of the council tax you pay comes to us. A bigger chunk goes to the Police and Crime Commissioner. So he, together with the constabulary, have to decide how to allocate police resources. But you do pay through your council tax for both highway maintenance and for the police.
Can I just say something on that? Sorry, Joe, to interrupt. The Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner are currently carrying out a survey on the public to ask them about their thoughts on how the police are funded and whether they would be willing to pay more to have more police resource. So I think if people are really interested in that and would like to understand and know more, then I would advise them to go to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner's website and take part in that survey.
Follow up from Callum, then I'll get on to some others we've had in advance. Do you think a factor towards mental health during the COVID pandemic could also come down to money and struggling? Yet the council are happy to say they are willing to help, but the second you miss a council tax payment, you get straight down our throats. Don't you think that a pause on council tax or even a reduction could help struggling families during this time of need so they have the extra cash to help feed their families? Mike, some serious accusations there, I would suggest. But, you know, I think we've got good council tax support, and certainly during COVID, we've sort of made sure that we are being sensitive to people's financial situations. Mike, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, absolutely. When the first lockdown came, we did defer sort of chasing people. But we have restarted that. And the issue becomes, if people are getting into difficulties in not paying, it's much better that they start a dialogue with us. There is, as you said, Joe, we have a local council tax support scheme. We made that more generous starting for this financial year, and it's there to help people who are struggling to pay their council tax. There's support available through the Citizens Advice Bureau as well for people in financial difficulty who are struggling. So I would absolutely urge people to, if they are finding that they can't make ends meet, to see how they can reduce their council tax bill. And obviously any other benefits that they might be entitled to. But I think it's incumbent on us as a council to, you know, obviously we need to collect the money through council tax to pay for all the services, you know, that we need to go and continue to provide for the people of the district.
And Mike, that's quite a pertinent point, isn't it? Because all councils over the next few months, doesn't matter which political party, you know, the vast majority of them are going to have to put council tax up. And obviously a lot of residents are going to be very concerned about that and the impact that'll have on them. What support is available for those that are struggling to pay their council tax and are really worried because council tax might be going up?
Well, I think, I referred to it just then. We have what's called the local council tax support scheme. Every council, either district or the unitary, if you're in that area, has one of these, and it's there to help people that, you know, can't afford to pay the full amount of the council tax. It's always worth people looking as well, you know, are they entitled to any discount, like a single person discount, for example, if their circumstances have changed. But the key message is get in touch with us, talk to our people. You can talk over the phone. Or you can send us an email, and really do just talk to our staff. That's what they're there to help people, you know, to make sure that they're not paying any more than they need to.
Great, right, okay. Tony, you're sat there, you've been quiet. Lots going on there in your portfolio. This is from Trevor via email. There are so many different grants as a business owner. It's really difficult to understand what I can apply for and how to do so. Is there any way I can do this to make it easier?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And I think the really good thing is that we've recognised that early on. Many business people will be aware that there are both closed and open schemes under the local restriction and support grants, that many people will have been dealing with various tiers of lockdown. It's caused a huge amount of complexity, quite frankly. And, you know, we've heard Jenny talk about lives. I mean, we're talking about livelihoods here. And it's not at all fun if you run your own business and you simply can't trade because you are closed down in lockdown. So I'm delighted to say that what our finance teams have done is to review all of the grants that any business can be eligible for. They have used this information to create an incredibly complicated but very helpful matrix, so that it means that now any businesses that have previously applied for a business grant and been successful will simply receive an email contact to confirm their circumstances haven't changed, and then in due course they will get their grants exactly as they should be without any further interruption. If you haven't been in receipt of a business grant before and it's still quite complicated, please get in contact with us now. Mike has already mentioned taxi drivers. Additionally, now we're doing our best for tenanted landlords, people who would have been missed out early on in lockdown. And we know these are difficult times. So if you are one of a group of the people that haven't been able to access discretionary grants in the past, I do encourage you to apply. We will do our best.
Okay.
Hopefully it's as easy as we can make it, and I'm confident that our finance teams will be getting those monies out during the next period.
Thanks, Tony. We've got one here from Mark via Facebook. Why did it take weeks for the grants to go live for January lockdown? I'd have thought they should have gone live the day after lockdown started. Tony or Mike?
Well, I'll give Mike the pitch up, because it's very difficult to go live with grants when you don't even have the guidance from central government. We would have wished to have gone live with these much earlier. It was further complicated by the fact that we went tier 2, tier 4, and then lockdown, and so it has complicated what would have otherwise been open grants and then became closed grants. So extremely complicated. I'll let Mike add to that. He'll have the details of the finance.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. I mean, we went live, as I mentioned, on the 20th of January, 2 weeks after we went in, obviously, to the last lockdown. But we have 8 different schemes. Tony was alluding to the complexity of it that we're having to administer. And basically, our officers looked at that and, let's say, the best way to get the money to people in the quickest fashion with the least amount of effort on their part is to actually simplify it so that there's 2 schemes that you can apply through on our website, and then our officers will work out how much you're entitled to in the short term, and obviously then as and when the lockdown continues, further payments will come out. So our officers have been working really hard to get money to people. I know that there are payments that are due to be processed tomorrow, so we're hoping that they will reach people next week, and therefore, we will be supporting the businesses, because we do understand, that this is a difficult time. We've had over 2,000 businesses have applied for grants since we opened them last week. So, we do recognise that businesses out there are in need of support, and we're doing absolutely everything we can to get it to them as quickly as we can.
Okay, we've got a couple of follow-ups there. I think Mark is live on Facebook. Mark, thanks for watching. Mark says, but you failed to singularly failed to distribute them. In due course isn't good enough. I sent the guidance to CDC, so this is a poor excuse. Other councils have paid out weeks ahoy. Do you want to just pick that up, Mike or Tony?
Yeah, no, well, we did pay out the November grants back in November. We're talking about, for people who applied at that time, so we're talking about the December grants and those for January. And the closed ones were relatively straightforward in December, but the other ones, the additional restrictions grants, weren't. The guidance didn't come till quite late. We were due to go live and open those at the start of the year, but then we paused that because of the lockdown coming in. So, I do appreciate there's some frustration that people haven't had the money as quickly as they think. Some other councils may have paid people quicker than us, but I feel confident now that we have the process in place to pay more people more quickly now that we are now ready, and we've been processing them since we opened them, the scheme last week.
Yeah, and I think I'd add to that is there's no, we don't get any benefit from not paying them out as soon as is possible. We've got to put processes in place. We've got to make sure that, we're not paying out in error and that we follow the government guidelines. So I appreciate, if you are a local business owner, it's a really difficult period for people. And if you hear of other councils that have paid out before, then that must be really frustrating. But, we're not sat here hoarding money because we don't want to pay it out. All of our officers are working as hard as they can to make sure they get paid out as soon as possible. We've got a quick VT on businesses, and then we're going to come back to some more general questions. So we've touched on COVID, we've touched on flooding, we've touched on business grants, and then we'll take some more questions on those, but we'll also have a more general set of questions as well. So if my wonderful team can run that VT on business grants.
Hello, my name's Tony Dale. I'm the Cabinet Member for Cotswold District Council for Economy and Skills. And as many of you know, it's been a challenging time the last few months, and particularly for our businesses. I want to tell you this morning about the fact that our grants have reopened on the Cotswold District Council website, and that if you are keen to get your payments, then now is the time to check all of your details and to make sure that your details are registered with Cotswold District Council on their website. If as a business you've already applied, you don't need to reapply. The council should have your details, and they are working very hard with a very complicated grant system to get the payments to you as quickly as they can. Check your emails, check your email inbox, make sure that you respond when we contact you. If you haven't applied for a grant, and that may be some new discretionary businesses, such as taxi drivers or tenanted pubs, then you can apply. Go onto the District Council website at cotswold.gov.uk and fill in your application now with your business details and your application for grants. This has been a challenging time for all of us, and I want to get your payments to you as quickly as this council can do so. We've worked really hard to make sure you only have a single, simple payment from the many complicated grants, and that the process is as easy as we can make it. Stay safe, stay careful, look after your customers and yourselves. Thank you.
Right, we'll go to some other questions then. So Bev on Facebook, why can't I put out more cardboard or waste during this period, even if it won't fit in your box or bag? Andy, I know this is an issue you feel very strongly about. Tell us why.
Simple answer is what I really want you to do is reduce, reuse, recycle in that order. There isn't a finite amount of capacity. There's a finite amount of capacity available on lorries. On any given day, because of the size of the Cotswolds, we've got somewhere between 35 and 39 lorries scurrying around with all of their crews of 2 to 3 people collecting everything. If we suddenly double the amount of cardboard, I would need another 14 recycling lorries out there. That's not fuel efficient, it's not climate friendly, and it costs an amount of money that as a council you really can't afford. So it's all about trying to reduce in the first instance. Recycling is often seen as being the solution to all problems. It isn't. You can't unconsume the resources that went into that thing you bought in the first place. The absolute best thing to do is to try and reduce it. If you're a household that is a large household, we do additional containers for those people. And you can talk to us about that and we can arrange that. We do multiple containers for those kind of households where there are going to be more people. But the normal size containers are intended for a normal household. And while we appreciate there is more stuff going on because people are at home, what we really need you to do is just keep thinking hard about what you buy, how it's wrapped, how it's packed, how you shop, how you get your online deliveries done, because all of those changes can actually reduce the amount of cardboard that's coming through. And that helps us to cope with what we're getting when we're already getting about 20% on more than we normally would. So we are trying to get more on, but there's a limit to how much you can physically get into the system.
Thank you. This is anonymous via email. Until now, the chief executive job, formerly and more correctly known as chief clerk at CDC, could be performed by someone who was CEO of West Oxfordshire, with the cost being shared between the two groups of council taxpayers. Why does CDC think it needs its own CEO, and what is the cost to the taxpayers? Rob, you're our CEO. Do you want to sing for your supper?
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and thanks for the question. It's a really good point. I mean, clearly, residents, businesses need to know what they're getting for their money. And I think one of the key things for me, and as I've said to some of you before, I want to make sure that I'm representing CDC's best interests on the local, regional and national platform. We've heard some of the issues around getting guidance out of government in a timely fashion to make sure we can get our business grants out. A key part of the the CEO role is lobbying government to make sure we're getting the guidance we need to make sure we can do our job more effectively and get money to people like you guys. Another big part of the CEO role is in making sure that we are driving those national initiatives and we're putting Cotswold District Council on the radar. We know as a council, if we're on that government radar, then we're better plugged into some of those opportunities, then we're more likely to be able to get sources of grant funding. Just last week, we've put in a grant funding bid to DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, for nearly £200,000 to start a youth hub within the Cotswold District patch. Now, being well connected to the likes of DWP and making sure we've got those opportunities is a really key part of my role. So it's really important that you've got somebody who is putting CDC front and centre of everything that's being done. Yes, there are opportunities to share CEOs, and lots of councils do that. But clearly within Cotswold District, we are committed to doing the very best for our residents and our businesses and making sure we're well connected to some of those opportunities. So having a CEO that is dedicated to some of those issues and some of those messages is really, really important. Like the councillors around the table, I'm more than happy for people to get in touch with me directly, and I'd welcome that, because it's only through engagement with you guys that we can make sure that we are listening and we are connecting government and other bodies to what is really, really important out there. So it's a fundamental role, and it's right that you asked the question, but watch this space. I think we're on the cusp of some great things within Cotswold District, and it's certainly a big part of my mission to make sure we're driving those forward.
Okay,
Joe, could I add to that?
Very quickly, Mike, we're time limited.
Yeah, the shared CEO job with West Ox is historic, and that wasn't the previous situation when we came into office last year. But it is important to note that that was the situation with the Chief Finance Officer. And as you know, we had a review from our peers that saying basically we didn't have enough resource in our senior management, and therefore, we've taken action to make our Chief Finance Officer full-time for the District Council in the same way we have a Chief Executive. Thank you,
Mike. We've got a question here, or a comment, I should say, from Rosemary Andrews, a loyal watcher. So pleased that you acknowledge that a lot of money and time went into trying to sort out some of the flooding problems after 2007. Water course change, more houses are built, often on the floodplains. Maintenance is not always a high priority when monies are so short. So it's worth revisiting the situation to see what has changed and how further problems can be ameliorated, particularly in the Cotswolds as a whole, not just in Cirencester. Andy, very 15-second comment on that.
Absolutely right. It isn't just Cirencester, though. This time round, the Lower Churn Valley has been the most affected area. So that's Cirencester, it's Siddington, it's South Cerney, generally in that order in terms of the impact. But there are other areas that have been affected, and we are doing work in those other areas, and our teams and our officers have been out there. Maintenance is important. I think maintenance and picking that back and getting on with it for all those who need to be doing it is going to be a big key part of what we will be pushing forward.
Thank you very much. Mark Lindsay with another comment on business grants. Mark, I can tell you're frustrated. Most ridiculous aspect of this affair is CDC comms using lockdown as an excuse for the late processing of these grants, the very issue the grants are there to mitigate against. Tony, do you want a quick comment on that? And I think other to say to Mark, Tony or Mike are more than happy to pick up the phone and have a chat with you in your case in particular. Appreciate the frustrations, but I think both have given an adequate and, I think, understandable justification. So, Tony, quick comment on that?
Yeah, some businesses have been frustrated, Joe, and I've been responding individually to any business that's found the process too slow to help them. I'm a businessman myself. I really fully understand how important cash flow is, and I know Mike does too. It's not that we wouldn't have wanted to try to get the money to you as fast as we could. We have genuinely worked so hard here to try and make the process as easy as possible. It's extraordinarily complicated in some other districts, so hopefully both Mike and I feel we've done the right thing by making this an easy and accessible process for everyone this time around. The cash is going out, we know from Monday, and it will be during next week that people will see money in their accounts. It's the usual 3 days, as it always is with banks, but we will be doing our best. I accept it's frustrating, but we all deal with frustrations in business, and at the moment I'm just really grateful for any support from the businesses in Cotswold who are doing their very best, I know, in difficult circumstances to stay open for our customers, and I very much hope they will continue to do so.
Thank you, Tony. Right, Chris Roach. Hi all, hope everyone is well and thanks for your work over the last year. Tony, can you commit to a virtual meeting with businesses and hospitality groups to outline any broader plan the Council now has to help these sectors in the coming years?
Yeah, I absolutely can, Joe. I've made it well known across all the business communities in the Cotswolds that I will meet with any group. I'm here to listen. First and foremost, that is what this administration is all about. I am keener than anybody to make the Cotswolds open for business and to make Cotswold District a great place to run your business from. If there are representatives of the hospitality industry, the visitor economy, as I prefer to call it, then I would love to meet with you, listen to your ideas, and to explain with you what we do. We've recently been incredibly successful with our tourism organisation here in winning lots of money from government to enhance our digital bookings capability. That will really help. There will be lots of people taking holidays in the UK this year. We would love them to come to the Cotswolds. Be safe, absolutely. Follow the safe guidelines. Only come when they're allowed to. But we have digital booking facilities now. We have a fantastic following in all of the social media platforms. And I'm really incredibly grateful to our tourism group for doing that. Very happy to meet with anyone in the hospitality industries if they want to talk to me. Absolutely.
So, Chris, get in touch with Tony and we will get that set up. Patrick Moylan, what progress is being made on Cirencester's Town Centre Master Plan, especially since COVID and lockdowns have made the need for a strategy and a plan and action vital? Patrick, thanks for watching. Good to hear from you. Yeah, it's something that as we emerge from lockdown is top of my agenda. Cirencester, a brilliant place to live, work and visit. But as we know, infrastructure is lacking in a lot of places, as it is in communities up and down the Cotswolds and the good work that you're doing on the neighbourhood plan group needs to be complemented by a really robust town centre master plan. So it's something that I've asked our forward planning team to put a bit of urgency into, and James Brain, our wonderful officer, is going to be, he should be in touch soon with a bit of an update on that. Rob, have you got anything to add on that? Appreciate you've only just got your feet under the table, but you might have more of an update.
No, thanks, Joe. Just to say, again, it's something I'm really keen to get up to speed with, and James and I are going to be looking to meet up with some of the Town Centre Master Plan partners. I've already had a really productive meeting with Andrew Tubb at the Town Council. So yeah, as Joe said, watch this space, but it's definitely something which we're going to be looking to move on in the next few weeks and months.
Great, thank you. We've got a question here from Maggie on Facebook. What's your thinking behind making car park machines cashless? Mike.
Our thinking is that we want to stop people driving all around the district collecting cash out of machines, and the environmental impact of that is 20,000 miles a year. We're also thinking is sadly that we want to stop the crime that's associated with the cash sitting in the machines. Over the last 4 years, we've had 9 incidents of theft from machines, and 2 big incidents we had at Bolton on the Water and the beaches in Cirencester. We estimate cost us £65,000 in lost income. That's why, Maggie, sadly, we need to, and we do have an alternative. We have a good alternative with our new pay-by-phone app, which you don't have to pay for, and you'll also be able still to pay using a bank card, either using chip and PIN or contactless.
Great. Paul in Morton, thank you for giving your constituents the opportunity to forward questions and answer them. As a new resident to Morton, we've really been impressed by the quality of life the town and the area offer. Morton is a lovely looking town, but the high street is sadly lacking in quality shops and businesses. The arrival of Morton Wine Merchants and Otis and Bell Bakery have added some much needed impetus to the high street. However, there's still a high number of premises which are either occupied by charity shops or remain empty. Tony, will the council consider engaging with landlords to offer rent-free periods or extend business rate relief or provide grants to potential business owners? The town lacks diversity and would benefit from attracting forward-thinking independents who could elevate Morton's status and attract more people to the town. Tony?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, to the point that we already are engaging with our high streets. This is a government initiative as well. I'm very happy to explain that. But what we're doing in the Cotswold districts area is that we're engaging directly with our local suppliers and with our local businesses to enable them to be profitable on the high street. And we can't be naive about this. We can have fantastic local artisan businesses made in the Cotswolds, sourced from goods and services in the Cotswolds, sitting on our high street and meeting our needs with really high quality. But we have to make sure they have the tools to do that job really effectively. And in this day and age, that's digital tools. It means they have to be able to run e-commerce operations as well, to enable a much wider audience than just people on the high street to access their goods and services, to make sure that they can fulfill those orders safely and quickly, and also to make sure they can generate traffic into their shops in advance of people coming to the area. So, as an example, we've been working with Maybe Tech, which talks to people about what the Internet of Conversations is doing, how people are discussing the things they want to buy, what they're looking for, and it informs local businesses about how they can improve their social media presence and have more impact so that people see them online as well as on the high street. For me, that is the future. We have to redesign our high streets to be attractive, vibrant, exciting places to be. I completely agree with the question that's been asked, and I'm doing everything in my power, not only to create the strategies for that green and sustainable growth, but also to deliver the actions that make a difference for our businesses.
Thank you, Tony. Question here from Howard in Cirencester. Between August and December 2020, residents in Chesterton Park experienced 4 instances of sewage outflow from manhole covers on their properties. This was during heavy rainfall after repeated calls to Gloss Highways and Thames Water. Both companies inspected their respective sewers and drains in January 2021. Both tell me they removed considerable debris and build-up. Since this has been done, there has been no outflowing onto property. Could I therefore suggest that a regular inspection and cleaning of drains and sewers is made in order to prevent this happening again? Can this be done? Andy, probably not a CDC responsibility, but we can certainly lobby on Howard's behalf. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, and one of the features we have in terms of our role, obviously, was investigating and looking at enforcement of are people doing the things they need to do. It gets a bit tricky with the Environment Agency and highways because they are independent bodies. We can't tell them what to do. What we can try and do is point out where there are real problems occurring, where we've got evidence for it, and where they need to prioritise their efforts. Definitely over the last decade, maintenance is another thing that started to drop off the radar. We've seen that in various areas to do with ditches, watercourses, roads, sewers. Most of the problems are not unknown, but they're unfixed. And as that particular case shows, if you don't fix them, they cause problems. If you do sort them out, you tend to avoid a lot of future issues. And that's the primary aim of the kind of work we can do in the local area, is to try and avoid those future issues by getting people to do the things that need doing.
Great, thanks, Andy. And we're having a flooding meeting, aren't we, in a couple of weeks that we'll be publicising this week. Do you want to just tell us about that?
We are, so that's just following up as part of our exercise in terms of intelligence and information gathering, just so we are sure we are on top of what happened, where it happened, and who it happened to, because there were some unusual features of some of the water flows we saw, again, particularly unfortunately in Cirencester, for people who aren't in Cirencester, but they were real issues in terms of things that were going on. So we're trying to pick up there and in all the other locations so that we can compare that against the known work and the work that's already been done and work out where there are gaps, and we can then try and push for those gaps to be closed. And that's the most useful thing we can do with our knowledge of what is going on the ground and getting that knowledge from our residents.
Okay, Stuart in Blockley has quite a long question about planning. Stuart, if you don't mind, because it is quite detailed and specific to a planning application in Blockley, I believe. I'm going to ask Rob Weaver, who's our Chief Executive, to follow up with you after the show, so he'll get in contact with you directly. We've got a couple of minutes left. We need to wrap up. These lovely guys manning the fort here want to go home. So, Jenny, I'm going to let you have a bit of a final word just on COVID, because I appreciate you've been quite quiet today, which isn't always the case, is it, in these shows? Jenny, do you just want to give us a minute on key messages you want people to take away?
Yeah, sure. I just wondered if I could just say a couple of words actually about our COVID support officers, which are in place of COVID marshals. I've been asked quite a bit about that, and I just wanted to explain what we decided to do. So we were given some money by the government, not very much, I have to say, towards these COVID marshals. And we decided that in a very rural area, 450 square miles, that we didn't think that COVID marshals with no legislation or ability to enforce anything was the right way to go. We also have huge faith in the majority of our Cotswold residents that they understand what the rules are. So actually we have got 3 COVID support officers who are actually qualified environmental health officers, and they have been working mainly with our businesses across the district, particularly hospitality, to ensure that all of those businesses are able to put in the right safety measures. And we've also been asked by the government to do spot checks on supermarkets and essential retailers to ensure that they are really enforcing the rules, particularly things like wearing masks and keeping 2 meters apart. So we have those support officers have been going across the district, doing those spot checks, talking to businesses. And I'm very pleased to report that actually the majority of our businesses have got very good safety measures in place. We do have repetitive complaints and trends of things that people complain about. So people occupying holiday accommodation is obviously still quite high up there, but they do investigate all of those. We work very closely with the police on that.
Okay, Jenny, I'm going to have to give you a 30-second warning, please.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to say, is that we are on it. I know that people would like us to be very, very strict on the enforcement, but I think we're doing all we can to support everybody. And just to say that keep doing what you're doing, and the end is in sight, and this will pass.
Thank you. And, just to round up, thank you to everybody at home for all the sacrifices you're making. We understand it's really difficult. I mentioned earlier, I suffer from mental health problems, and, being locked up at home is just about the worst thing for that. And, we're all having a really, really tough time. And I know it's easy to want to sort of take those little bits of freedom when you can get them. We know it's really difficult, but as Jenny said, hopefully with this vaccine there is light at the end of the tunnel, and as the year progresses, we'll be moving to a more normal type of life that we know and that we love. Really, really difficult. And I just want to say as well, I know there can be a lot of frustration directed towards, councils, councillors, and, just in general. But, ultimately, we are here to serve you. We do the best we can, and we can't always give you the things that you want to hear or do what, do necessarily what we'd like, actually, in a lot of cases. We've had our government funding cut by 60%. That means tough decisions on the finances, and it's a really, really frustrating time. Nobody goes into local government to, frustrate and try and annoy people, but unfortunately, sometimes there are realities, and we have to make tough decisions, and sometimes decisions are uncomfortable and might annoy people. But we do try our best. We try our best to listen, and that's what this exercise is about. I hope you'll agree. We've tried to answer the difficult and awkward questions that some of you have put, as well as the ones that aren't as challenging, and we'll continue to do that. That's fundamental to what I believe, and I know all of us here at Cotswold District Council want to try and be as transparent, as open as possible. I know there are a few questions that we haven't been able to get to today, owing to the time. Amanda and Morton, we will try and get that. We will try and get a response to you offline, or if not, wait until Wednesday the 17th when we'll be back with one of these Q&As. So folks, please stay safe, stay at home, protect the NHS, and together we will get through this a lot quicker. See you next month.